as we inch closer to the budget session of 2024, there are multiple expectations that have been voiced out from multiple industries and corners. There is a list of 15 expectations, top 15 expectations of this budget. From taxation policies, infrastructural changes, changes in housing, industry, to clean energy, and lots more. Well, the big question is, what can the common people expect from this budget, and what can they expect to gain as well? This is exactly what we will discuss with our guests. Joining us on the show at this point in time is Mr. Vinesh Menon. He is the CEO of Ampersand as well as the co-chairman of CII, National Education Committee. Dr. Sharath Kohli, senior economist, joins us on the program as well. Wing Commander S. Sudhakaran, CEO of Q Gates Technology, also with us on the program. Sridhar Samudrala, founder of Hector, is also with us on the program. Mr. Rajesh Bansal, CEO of Midas Investment, and last but not the least, Mr. Sandeep Chatra, Executive Director of Action Aid, is with us on the program as well. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us and speaking out. Vinesh, I'll begin with you. Well, there are a lot of expectations of this budget, and every time it is impossible, perhaps, for the government as well as the finance minister to accommodate that. But, we are on the anvil. We are on the cusp of a growth spurt. We are talking about 7 trillion. We are talking about the third largest economy in the next few years. In your opinion, what are some of those top priorities that the government needs to grab by the horns, contend with at this point in time to make sure that everybody is happy? It's an impossibility to keep everyone happy, Vinesh, but I'm sure the government tries. Your thoughts?
Yeah, good evening, Vineet and gentlemen. And thank you, Vineet, for having me on the show, not because it is me, because I'm a representative from the education sector. And it's very heartening to see that after a long time, there is a representation from the education sector on a pre-budget discussion, because you seldom find that. And you're absolutely right. I think we are moving at a very fast pace. And honestly, this particular budget is an on-account budget. It's an interim budget, and I don't really expect any major moves. But it's a good time for us to pause and discuss a few very important reality checks. And I'm going to stick to school education here. In 1964, the Kothari Commission, they wanted the budget for education to be up from 2.9% to nearly 6% in about 20 years, which is in 85-86. 85-86, it should have been 6%, it was 3%. And guess what? Today, we're still sitting on about 3 to 3.5%, still sub 4%. And I think that is one major change that we need to bring. Education is an ICU, school education especially, and with the number of schools and the number of children that are going to schools, I think this needs a lot of correction. Today, if you look at all the government schools especially, 80 to 85% of the salaries, 85% of the budgets are spent on salaries. There is no room for innovation, and everybody knows that we need to make massive changes in transformation in education, especially on the innovation side, and there is no room for that. So I would be very, very keen for some discussions and some thought to be laid for provisioning in that area. Public-private partnerships, an area which I think is starting to make a lot of momentum in the other sectors. I think budget should be provisioned to enhance that area, at least on the school side, drive better infrastructure, drive better academics, drive better deliveries and assessment, etc. Subsidies for digital devices, another major area. I could go on and on. I mean, there are these are the few things which I would definitely want.
But definitely, one counter question I have for you, Vinesh, is you talk about education, you talk about the penetration that the government needs to do in the education sector, but at the same time, how is a comprehensive digitization policy going to help this endeavor by the government, and the one that you would also like to see fructify?
So digitization to me is one of the most important vehicles to democratize education in the country. You want to reach the last mile, you need to probably look for some way of reaching out to them online. And when we talk about online, we're talking about digital devices. When we talk about digital devices, we're talking about affordability, we're talking about bandwidth. We need to start looking at these areas to drive a little bit of the budgets. There is a very big move by the Prime Minister's office with what is called the PM Shri schools. Nearly about 4,000 crores are being spent on PM Shri schools. About 14,000 PM Shri schools are being positioned as model schools in the country. I'm sure this is going to be modeled around a lot of tech, a lot of experiential learning, digitization of classroom, etc. But you work backward and get into the per student math. it's not going to work out. So you need to at least have a double of what has been outlaid so far. So to answer your question, digitization is probably the key. And you can see that in every other sector. You can see that in hospitality, you can see that in healthcare, you can see that in telecom, you can see that in aviation, railways. Why not education? And that's what I want to emphasize on. And it is not as if it's not happening, but I think it just needs to be tweaked. You have a lot of provisions to start driving digital devices, to the masses. But how do you get the content in? How do you get the training out here? How do you get the monitoring, assessments? A lot of work needs to be done around these areas, and that needs a little bit of focus. This is as far as the government schools go. As far as the private schools go, I think there's only one area which is paining me a bit. Private schools today, when they take fees from students, there is no taxation on those fees, and rightly so, because students should not be taxation on education. But then if the same private schools are procuring items for delivering the same education, let's call it whatever they procure from the market, whether it is uniforms, technology, they have to pay tax for it. So we should have a level playing field. If you don't take tax from the students, I think they should also have the chain should go beyond even in the other side when they procure this goods for the education.
Absolutely right. Let me also rope in Mr. Sandeep Chachra into this conversation. Mr. Chachra, your expectations of the budget. What are the areas you feel that the government needs to focus on? Also reminds me of a couplet from Ghalib. हज़ारों ख्वाहिशें ऐसी कि हर ख्वाहिश पे दम निकले. What are some of these asks that you think are important for the government to focus on? Let's also keep that prism of employment and Atmanirbharta in mind, sir.
No, thank you. And I love your khwahish, and all of us have khwahish. This is an election year budget. So the working classes of India, the poor of India, the popular classes of India, the women of India have several expectations from the budget. But budget, as you know, is always a balancing act. Paisa kahan se aayega aur paisa kahan jayega. So where the revenue is coming from. Now, let's remember that despite global headwinds, we are doing pretty good. The economic review presented yesterday talked of 7.2% GDP growth. So we all know those figures. So that looks good. And I expect the finance, despite election year, I expect the finance minister to go on a fiscal consolidation path. The target was 5.9%. That was a deficit last year. This year, we're hoping that it get to somewhere close to 5.5, the reduction in the fiscal deficit target. So that's what. Now the question is where the revenue is going to come from. There are many expectations, many eyes on this budget. And I think tax buoyancy has been on the up for these years. So I don't see much more room for direct tax increases in this year's budget, election year budget in particular. So I think the first point would be how to shore up the revenues. The usual path is disinvestments. So in public sector, it's likely to happen. But I think the more important task would be the redistributive measures. So the possibility of introducing higher capital gains taxes in order to address the needs that we have for the working classes, but also perhaps the wealth tax. Now that's in as much as the revenue is concerned. So I would expect and hope that there's a degree of wealth tax introduced in this budget to shore up government's revenues, given its fiscal consolidation targets and given it's an election year budget. And that revenue surplus or shoring up that we do could be easily redistributed. Now, in terms of the expectations, I think a good framing that I would like to see is what the Honorable Prime Minister had said earlier, the Gyan framing, the Garib, the Kisan, the Annadatta, that is, and the Yuva and the Nari. So I think that is how one would want to see the expectations met. And I think if I were to talk of poverty eradication, we have a youthful population. So I think the question of creating sustainable employment, the question of creating sustainable livelihoods, the question of creating social security is the topmost in my mind, since you asked this question. So in that context, while the economic review figures are pretty promising, the work participation rate of women have gone up. Similarly, with reference to youth employment or unemployment, youth employment, that's growing. But given that, I would like to see a much higher allocation in employment generation measures, in sustainable livelihood creation measures. For example, augmentation of the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, extension of the MGNREGA into the urban setting. That'd be very important. If you go by MGNREGA budgets, actually the revised estimates of 2022-2023 budget, financial year budgets, are higher than what was allocated in 23-24. There's a deficit there. So one would like to see that. One would like to see employment in urban areas. One would like to see the production-linked incentive schemes, which are currently applicable 14 sectors, expand into sectors such as jewelry, such as garment making, which are women-based sectors. So one would like to see that. One would like to see Housing for All program continue. The Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana comes to an end this year. And going by government's own estimates, 33 million houses have been generated in the last 3 years, which is a great thing. But there's a shortfall of about 1.5 million in urban areas and about 20 million in rural areas. So in order to meet that shortfall, you need to extend the scheme and make allocations for Housing for All. It's a critical need.
Yeah.
Similarly, we've had announcements of the Social Security Code in 2020. It's a vital code because it enables a social security provisioning for the mass of informal sector workers, which is a large number, upwards of 90% of India's working population. So that is crucial. So we do need a robust social security fund. We hope a robust social security fund is announced in this budget. And that enables the next steps. I want to come back, but
right, so I'll come back to you. So let me also rope in Dr. Kohli into this conversation. Dr. Kohli, there is a plethora, there's a cornucopia of things or a list which we can talk about, which the government needs to work on. In my opinion, the impetus is always going to lie on growth. Do you think, considering our aspirations and our ambition, what kind of a pedestal is to be given to what factor to ensure economic growth and inclusive growth, Dr. Kohli? I hope you catch my drift.
Yes, Vineet, thank you very much. Vineet, I would like to complete the couplet which you spoke from Mirza Ghalib.
I was hoping you would.
No, I'll also tweak it. हजारों ख्वाहिशें ऐसी कि हर ख्वाहिश पे दम निकले. बहुत निकले बजट के प्रावधान फिर भी कम निकले. Because there is no end to expectations. I mean, every sector expects, Vineet, every citizen of the country expects. Budget is so much looked forward to. But let me be politically correct here. Even though this is vote on account, even though this is interim budget, but I think no government can ignore that there is elections right after that. So I think, whereas this will also be a sanction from the parliament for the remaining months' expenses which the government needs, which is the definition of vote on account, I think to be politically correct, the government would not like to miss out the opportunity to reach out to the electorate that, look, this government is for you. This government is for your welfare. This government is for your prosperity. I think these three aspects will not be missed out under any circumstance. And I completely endorse what Sandeep said. The Gyan framing, I think that is going to remain the focus. Garib Kalyan Yojana we've seen has been extended for another few years. That is going to continue. Focus on poor people. Prime Minister said, I believe in only 4 castes. There is no Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya or Shudra, whatever the caste system, the traditional caste system. There are 4 castes. Garib, the first caste. Youth, 65% of our population beneath is below 35 years of age. No budget, I feel, can ignore the interests of the youth. When it comes to youth, we talk of education, we talk of skill development, and we talk of the opportunities which the Indian youth have today. How much opportunity, the employment of the youth, I think that will be in focus. Then comes the farmers, the Annadata, I think farmers, for me, India being predominantly an agriculture economy, we still have 60 to 70% of our population being directly or indirectly dependent on agriculture. I think no budget can ignore farmers anyway. But being in focus, I can see PM Kisan Samman Nidhi being further consolidated. From 6,000 rupees, you could see this limit going up to probably 10,000 or 12,000 or 8,000, whatever the government coffers permit within the limitations. We could see this going up. And then women, 50% of the population, we've seen this government's approach towards women, the women reservation bill in the parliament and in other things which have been done. 23% beneath of the women workforce in India participate in the economic activity. If I flip the coin, 77% of the women do not participate in the economic activity. However, I would like to add, without attracting the ire of women community, I would say the women who run the household, they contribute more to the economic activity. If the men who are sitting on the screen, if the women don't back them, I'm sorry, you would not be able to walk down to your office and have your breakfast or lunch or dinner or whatever. So therefore, your children will not be brought up. So therefore, but let's be very precise. 23% directly contribute to economic activity. With 50% of the population, 23% contribution, it looks a bit skewed. And I'm sure government would focus on what are the ways and means where more and more women can come down and join the main economic activity. Apart from upliftment of women, apart from providing security to the women, I think that will also be the focus. So these 4 pillars which Prime Minister has spoken, they remain intact, whether it is interim budget or whether it is a full-scale budget. I do not see any compromise happening on this front, Vineet. As far as taxation is concerned, well, some tweaking in taxation could be, I'm expecting, the very famous standard deduction, which was brought into the new regime. I see some kind of consolidation happening that from 50,000 rupees, one can expect this going up to 75,000 odd rupees or maybe 1 lakh rupees, which is the need of the hour because it needs to be linked to inflation. It is basically an inflation-driven deduction which is given under Section 16 of the Indian Income Tax Act. It needs to be consolidated. Then the new regime itself, which was made bereft of deductions and exemptions. That was the finance minister's idea, that we don't want deduction as exemption, just have one single scheme, simple calculations, easy to arrive at your tax. I think I can see some tweaking, which is the new pension system.
Right.
May be brought into the new regime, unlike some of the other deductions. I'm sure other speakers are waiting to speak.
Yeah, we have a packed house today, Dr. Kohli. We have a packed house today. Let me also quickly go to Sridhar Samudrala, founder of Hector, on his expectations of the budget. Sridhar, you belong to the real estate sector, which has had its own share of challenges and problems. Any leeway or respite that you are hoping that the government is going to construe, to accommodate people, who want to have a house?
Right. Thank you so much, Vineet, for the opportunity. Even Sandeep ji spoke about the housing gap. I don't know how many of us know, but, there are 5 lakh properties with banks waiting to be sold. 5 lakh properties just with the banks ready. That can probably, solve to certain extent of the gap, number one. Number two, I want to bring highlight to, a 5 lakh crore collection opportunity for banks, and which can be put back to circulation. If you look at the RBI annual report, there is like 7.5 lakh crore worth of NPAs. Okay, and there are a few more lakh crores with, other lending institutions. If you put together approximately this 12 to 15 lakh crores. And, if we consider it as a khazana, NPS as a khazana, and evangelize, our bad bank and certain reforms, lending reforms, we can bring back at least 5 lakh crores of collection to banks, which can be lent afresh, promote more circulation, number one, meet certain amount of housing gap. So 2 objectives can be met by just 2 initiatives. Number one, evangelize, the bad bank, NARCL, and the marketing arm, IDRCL. I've been following about, them in the last few budget sessions. And I think they are not set now. And if we, promote them, provide more authority and support, they can do a great job.
And a lot of people may consider this as a lost cause, Sridhar. You're absolutely right. If this is something which the government streamlines and calibrates properly, then 5 lakh crores is a chunk of change.
Yeah, it can be used. It is at least 1/4 of our infrastructure spend. It is a huge amount of money. Everybody talks about fund expectations. Spending expectations from budget. This is a collection opportunity for budget. Take back 5 lakh crores.
Right, that's a good point. Mr. Rajesh Bansal, CEO of Midas Investment, is also joining us on the program. Mr. Rajesh, I hope you can hear me. Mr. Bansal, if you're there with us.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bansal, what are your expectations of the budget? You hail from the financial system, you hail from the financial market, and of course, The budget, the economy, and the Lok Sabha elections are directly interlinked. What can be expected? We have been seeing a lot of volatility, if I can call it that, in the stock market in the last few days. Is that going to be, in fact, up for grabs again once this interim budget is put out by Nirmala Sitharaman?
Yeah, thanks, Sunit, for the opportunity. From the stock market point of view, we are just looking for the 2 points. One, how the government does the fiscal consolidation. Like in 2 years before, the government has laid down the path to bring the fiscal deficit to 4.5% of the GDP. Last year, it was 5.9%. So the market expects the government to be on the fiscal consolidation path and bring down the fiscal deficit to 4.5% as promised by FY26. And second, market eagerly looking for the nominal growth projection, GDP growth projection. Last year, government projected at 13%. Even if this year it will be less than 10%, less than double digit, market expect that it is more than 10 to 11%, then it's still a good number, because unless there is a higher growth rate in the GDP, nominal growth rate, there will not be much money left in the hands of the government to do the spending on the capex or the infrastructure spending, or to provide more concession to the tax in front of taxation, or to provide the boost to the rural growth of the economy, which is very need of the hour. Because you might have seen in the last few quarters where there is a lot of demand for the expensive or the expensive goods, but at the same time the rural economy is staggering. So on this front, the stock market is looking only these 2 points. If government delivers on these 2 points, market will be very choppy. Of course, if there is some tax concession, which I feel will be very unlikely at this point of time, if it does happen, there will be another boost to the stock market.
All right, good points there, Mr. Bansal. Let me also rope in Wing Commander Sudhakaran into this conversation. Commander Sudhakaran, obviously, Atmanirbharta and indigenization and vocal for local is something which is going to find tremendous support and tremendous push from the government as well, because I keep saying over and over again that the one area that the government definitely could and should work on is the generation of employment. And what better route than this?
Absolutely. When we started working on the Technology India's vision for 2047, the Prime Minister had directed us to work towards total technology leadership. And technology leadership, when we talk about technology dominance, and that actually primarily stems from Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. And Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan essentially means employing your own indigenous people. And last week I was in Delhi. We were attending one of the global AI summits. And then, I was disheartened to understand that we don't even understand the importance of indigenizing AI. They think that it can be collaborated, it can be partnered, it can be bought from outside. And that is a sinister technology, deep technology, because that is key to India's technology leadership ambitions. And, if I talk about it, I am reminded of Robert Frost. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry, I could not travel both. And be one traveler, long I stood, and I looked down as far as I could to where it bent down under the undergrowth. While what my fellow panelists so far spoke about is relevant and is important, I will have to remind that if India is going to touch new heights, new glories, and we are aspiring to be a superpower, if the world is looking up to us as the power of the 21st century, you need to look at the skies. You need to invest in the future. You need to invest in the deep tech. Unfortunately, our investment, the startups at 70,000 that we talk about, numbers don't matter, because these trading techs, these grocery techs, these retail techs, they're not going to make you superpower. Yes, they will, kickstart your economy. They will give you bits and pieces here and there. But if you need to be superpower, you need to build original technologies yourself. And, to put things in perspective, the generative AI large language models, the kind of GPUs that they run on, the H100 class, each GPU costs something like 45,000 USD. And if you're going to tax the seed, the startups that are going to run these next generation technologies
All right.
and catapult you into technology leadership positions, they're not going to grow into trees. So my message to the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister is, don't tax the seed. Let you tax a tree tomorrow, but let the seeds grow into the tree. Allow them.
You're absolutely right, sir. Vinesh, Emmanuel Macron was here a few days ago, and he said that India and France are going to work towards a goal where 30,000 Indian students can go to France and study. But the fact of the matter is that India should also be looked upon and cultivated and propagated as as a destination when it comes to education. In that endeavor, in that quest, what do you think some of the expectations can be?
I think clearly we need to, the fact is, the Prime Minister has been talking about Make in India. So why not extend that to education? Why not try and get the children to realize that they can get the best of education within the country itself? And, Dr. Kohli was mentioning about 65% of our population is under 35 years of age. Well, let me give you another data. 33% of that 65% are students. They are children going to preschools and schools. That's nearly about 300 million. And you just can't start looking for avenues to move these 300 million at some point of time abroad. There is, of course, a cream that can go there in case, to pure economic advantage. But what we need to focus upon is the ones who are not economically advantaged, and that needs to be taken care of. And may I dare say that we have spent about 1.4 lakh crore on Swachh Bharat mission. Let me just make a statement. Perhaps if we had given the kind of budget that is required for education long back, as recommended by the Kothari Commission in 1964 and 85, we may not need to have spent so much on Swachh Bharat mission, because education itself would have gone up, and that would have had a direct linkage in not, for want of any other words, dirtying the country. So I think one needs to sit down and look at this at a slightly different lens, and work around tweaking that part. And therefore, I end by saying that the GDP, the education budget cannot be less than at least 5 to 6% of the GDP. We need to make a dramatic movement on that in that direction.
All right, Mr. Chachra, quick closing comments, and then we go to Dr. Kohli and the rest of the panelists.
Very quickly, I think those who hold up more than half the sky, the point is, how does each successive budget serve their needs? This is the woman of India. It's a value and it's a future changer. And in that regard, let me quickly say, to build on what Dr. Kohli was saying earlier, simply to say there are 8 crore women in different self-help groups. We are known as a land of self-help groups. So the point is, how does the budget serve those needs to transform those self-help groups into enterprises owned by women, farmer producer organizations, non-farm organizations as business enterprises. So I think that's the big one. It needs a big budgetary boost.
All right.
Number one. Very quickly, I think the other crucial question which we haven't spoken to, and very briefly, is the loss and damage, the climate impact. A lot of the farm sector and the urban construction sector and the urban sector is impacted by the climate sort of crisis. RBI's own data tells us that by 2030, we might lose 4.5% of our GDP because of heat stresses and climate impact. And I think we need a mechanism, apart from sustainable farming, promoting, giving in much more investment there. We also need a mechanism for loss and damage compensation to the workers of India who are losing wages, who are losing employment on that account. That fund needs to be also set up. That's what I'll say in my closing.
Dr. Kohli, closing thoughts, sir?
Well, very quickly, I think the government at this point, Vineet, is in the best position politically and economic-wise. On the front of economy, we are in a very good position. We are on a launch pad where we can really add to the dividends that we have really gathered over the last 10 years. I think this opportunity should not be spilled, and the growth momentum which has been there will be further propelled. Although I'm sure the government is very confident of coming back, and I too have no doubt. Thanks to the wailing opposition. So I think there will be another chance in July, and it will further consolidate from here.
All right, Sridhar, concluding thoughts?
Yeah, so if we look at $10 trillion aspiration of the economy, the fastest way to grow is number one, we have a lot of assets under banks, which I emphasized earlier, NPAs. So they are ready to operate, ready to possess assets. And if we promote them, then it'll provide a huge lever for our MSME industries, individuals, proprietors, individuals to buy them, and move forward faster, grow faster, and contribute to the economy.
All right, Mr. Bansal, quick concluding thoughts. Mr.
World third largest economy, so we need to have a vibrant stock market, and to keep the stock market vibrant, we believe this government will take those measures where the taxation part will not be touched, the long-term, short-term, or even it will be released on the lower side. Maybe STT will be removed if possible. And at the same time, the Indian bond market will also be made vibrant by not increasing the government borrowing, at the same time by increasing tax shops and making the retail participation more attractive.
All right. Wing Commander Sudhakaran, concluding thoughts, 5 seconds, please. Are you there, sir?
Yeah, I would specifically look at increasing the JER ratio from 0.7 to 2% to go immediately, and then get immediate focus on deep tech and see how you can get the required hardware resources subsidized by the government to a large extent for deep tech and stealth tech startups.
We've received a comprehensive laundry list of suggestions, and I'm definitely hoping that the finance minister is going to be listening to these suggestions, because they are what the budget is going to be about, and these are some of the improvements that the budget could use.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.